Welcome to The Productive Attorney, the podcast that teaches attorneys how to be more productive and how to enjoy their life more. My name is Jim Zadeh. I'll be your host. There'll be times I'll be doing it on my own, and there'll be times I'll have guest speakers. Since this is the first one, I want to get into the basics, and so this will be on my own. And I'll dive right in by introducing myself and telling you a little bit about what the podcast is going to be about, do a quick war story, and then I'll give you a couple things about the fundamentals of the law firm. And then we'll get into the deeper dives in future podcasts. I have been an attorney for 33 years. I graduated from SMU in Dallas in 1988, went to work with Shannon, Gracie, Ratliff & Miller, which at the time was the second largest law firm in Fort Worth. Fort Worth currently is the 12th largest city in the country, so it was a big law firm in a big city. I worked there for 5 years. During those 5 years, I worked on commercial litigation. My partner at the time left after 5 years and asked me to go with him to a new firm, and I agreed. I went to a firm called Borland, Kirkman, Seiler & Evans, where I was an associate there and then became a partner. I worked there for 8 years. I left Borland, Kirkman & Seiler in 2001 when we had a meeting of all the attorneys, all the partners came together. We were in the most expensive space in town. We were looking at a very expensive 5-year lease, and we were all going to be required to personally guarantee that lease. I had seen Shannon, Gracie, and Ratliff & Miller stumble when they had personally guaranteed a lease in a merger. When the merger blew up, the partners were still liable on that lease. And I knew that one of the partners in our firm was probably going to be a judge, which he ultimately did. And I just saw potential for us being on the hook for that. And I'd always want to start my own firm. And so I told the partners in early 2001 that I wasn't going to be part of signing up in 2002. And in January 1, 2002, I started the law office of Jim Zadeh, PC, again here in Fort Worth. I've been at that law office, which is my firm, now going on almost 20 years. During that time, I've had anywhere from 1 to 2 attorneys working for me, sometimes 0, just me. Currently, I have 2 lawyers that work for me, and I have 3 legal assistants. I'll go through my firm quite a bit as we go through the podcast, but for right now, that's what I do. I'll tell you the type of work I do. I'm currently doing plaintiff's personal injury, but I've also done defense work. I represented a company that manufactured asbestos-containing brakes, and I was their counsel for all of Texas. When they were bought out by a bigger company, I sent the files to the lawyers for the bigger company. I dove into the plaintiff side doing silicosis work, and I did that through 2007 when the laws were changed, making the medical barriers almost impossible to reach for these individuals. So I dove back into the basics, and I did what I was being asked for my clients, and it came into being personal injury work on the plaintiff side, also representing first parties in insurance disputes, and also do employment law on both company and employee side. So I've been doing that since for probably the last 10 years. Currently we have a lot of business. We're very fortunate. In addition to that, since in about 2016, I became an adjunct professor at Texas A&M School of Law. I teach a class called Law Practice Management, and that class is designed for law students to give me a business plan at the end of class for their own firm or for a partnership with another classmate. In that, we talk about during the class, we talk about all the aspects of running a law firm, which we'll talk about a little bit here today. And I discovered early on when some of the students asked me advice, I started doing what I call one-on-ones, where I would sit down with students and go through what career path that they envisioned, what steps they'd taken towards that, and I would generally find out if they were going in the right direction. I've been teaching that class sometimes twice a year, but at least once a year up to the present. Right now I'm currently teaching a class that has 29 students in it. I've had anywhere from 20 to 33 students each semester in that class. Been very fortunate to have that. I also teach a class called Case Evaluation and Client Relationships. That's a mini-mester in the winter. It's just a short 1 hour class that I teach where I have the students come in and they give me their areas of interest, and then we walk through evaluation of cases, and we talk about how to manage clients in those cases, deciding whether to take them, and if you do take them, what to do with them. And then just last year I started teaching advanced torts. I've taught that one semester in the spring. I really enjoyed it, and I'll be teaching again this spring. The reason why I'm teaching and the reason why I'm doing this podcast is that when I got out of law school and started working at Shannon Gracie, I realized I wasn't ready. SMU did a good job of teaching me the basics of law, understanding what law is, but they didn't teach me about marketing at all. They didn't teach me about technology at all. They didn't teach me the politics of a law office. They didn't teach me the politics of a courthouse or how to deal with judges. And they did not teach me the day-to-day management of a firm, how you come in during the day, how you handle your day, what is your to-do list, how do you manage email, how do you manage client calls, all of those things. How do you manage your time during the day? How do you become more productive? None of that was taught. And I promised myself, as I got older, I'm a natural coach. I've coached soccer. We'll hear a lot about my soccer career during these podcasts, but I coach a lot of soccer. I've been a big brother and big brothers and sisters. I've done a lot of things coaching-wise to make it so that I can help people, and that's what the class is about, and that's what this podcast is about. So what I found when I got out was that I was working really hard. I was working 50 to 80 hours a week, and by working 50 to 80 hours a week, I mean really working, not just surfing the internet, and back then there was no internet, but not just going down the hall and talking to somebody. This was real, honest-to-God, grinding work. And what I found out was that I was exceptionally inefficient. Looking back, I was. But most importantly, I didn't have a work-life balance. I was living to work. I wasn't working to live, as the old adage goes. And it became a problem. It became a problem for mental health. It became a problem for my family, which I will get into. So this podcast, if you're in law school or you're thinking about law school, I'll try and give you a peek behind the curtain. I know what law students have said for the last 5 years, what their concerns are, what's going on. I'm going to try and teach you to become more productive. And when we talk about the fundamentals of a law firm, there are the blocking and tackling, if you will. There are the day-to-day stuff that we can talk about. And then there's some softer stuff that we talk about. And one of the first things we'll get into is core values and how you need to have your firm match your core values, and how to do that. Of course, first you have to identify them, and looking into yourself is one of the harder things to do. I found that students, when presented with why are you here in law school, or lawyers, when I ask them why they're in the practice that they're in or why they're doing what they're doing, it's a harder question for them than to look up a case or to look up the law and draft a brief. A lot of times we just do it because that's kind of what we've fallen into, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to teach about marketing, technology, finances, and I'm going to talk real numbers. I'm not going to talk, just kind of rough. I'm going to tell you what I think it takes to run a law firm, how much it costs, where your costs are, and how you can become more efficient. I'll talk about the day-to-day management of a law firm. I'm going to use several methods. I'll use current and past war stories. I'll use current events in the legal world. I have guest speakers, and I'll just do a traditional method. Some of the first podcasts we're going to have is how to make your law firm represent your core values, why a written business plan is so important, law firm marketing 101, law firm technology 101. And then one of the things that I've been looking at real closely, that's the biggest danger to lawyers today, and I don't think many lawyers are paying attention to it, but if they did, they would start to see a threat to their practice, and they would start to see a threat to what we're all doing. So I'll start out with what I consider what I call the war story, but what I consider to be the kind of turning point for me in my life as to how I became more productive and how law became more enjoyable to me. When I was at Shannon Gracie, I was the top biller in my class. I generated more originations than anybody in my class, and I was proud of that. I was proud of how hard I worked, and I was proud when the sheet came out each month and would have the number of hours that an attorney billed, and mine would be the highest. And I would often bill 200 hours in a month, which, as if anybody's out there billing, they know that really billing 200 hours takes about 80 hours a week. And I was working that hard. My family, I had married to a wonderful lady. We've been married 32 years. In the beginning, she was working too, and so that wasn't really a problem. And then in 1997, we had our first child. And in 2001, we had our second child, 2 boys, Michael and Kyle. And so in 2002, when Kyle was 1 and Michael was 5 and I was starting my own practice, I stepped it up even more. A couple reasons why I stepped it up even more. One is I'm starting my own firm and I want it to be successful. But the second was, and I didn't really admit it, but the second reason was that I don't enjoy the stage of child development from age 0 to about 3 or 4. First of all, it's a lot of hard work. And as you can tell by my hours, I'm not afraid of hard work. But that just seems to me to be something that I don't like. So a way to avoid that was to be at the office. And so I was doing something that was socially acceptable, and I was doing something that was making and supporting my family so I could be away from it, but I really didn't like it. I love my boys, and I love my boys then, but I could only handle them at that time, I thought, in small doses. So in 2002, my wife, who's a social person and somebody who is extremely supportive, came to me and said, "Look, Jim, you're working too hard, and I'm just frustrated by it. I have tried to make our life a life where we're together, but I'm going to continue to love you and support you, and I'm not divorcing you. I'm mentally going to shift to living a separate life from you. We will live parallel lives, and I will be with the kids, and you will be with your work, and if we get together, we get together, and if we don't, we don't." And it was no ultimatum. It just, that's what she said she was going to do. So each year I do my goals. I've done my goals in writing with a friend of mine named Tim. We've done it almost every year since the 90s. And we both become successful. And I attribute a lot of that to the goals. There's something about writing them down. They're no longer New Year's resolutions. They're written goals. I keep my written goals in my sock drawer, so I see them every morning and know that this is what I'm trying to accomplish for the year. A lot of times when you get into the day-to-day of life, you forget the big picture, and these kind of bring you back. You typically do them over Thanksgiving and Christmas when you have time to think, when you have time to reflect back on the year you've had and see what it is that's important to you going forward. So for January 1, 2003, I made a simple resolution that changed just about everything for me. My resolution was to be at home for breakfast and for dinner with my wife and my boys. My father had been a surgeon growing up. He left in the morning before I would go to school, and he would come home after I went to bed. I would not see him typically the whole week until Sunday afternoons. He'd be home Sunday afternoons. I would see him then, and then I would just not see him for another week. I loved my father. I admired my father, but I never got close to him as I wanted to, and that's a big regret in my life. And I realized then that I didn't want that for my kids. So we started that, and I would be there for breakfast, and I'd be there for dinner. What that forced me to do was end my day and become more productive in my day. That probably over the last 20 years, I haven't made as much money as I could have, but we have enough right now to be comfortable, enough that I don't have to work if I don't want to work. So why would I have sacrificed that relationship? I've found as I've gotten older that relationships are the most important thing. Who you're with is more important to where you are. The depth of a relationship is more important than the material things that you have. And so I would be there for breakfast. I'd be there for dinner. I would be engaged. I wanted to be present. We made a rule pretty early on, Ann and I did, my wife. We call it dinner table talk, and that is that what's said at the dinner table stays at the dinner table, similar to attorney-client privilege. The only way that you would say something outside the dinner table is if some person gave express permission to do that, or it was a danger to themselves or others, and we would then as a group make a decision as to how to handle that. When the boys were 5 and 1, there wasn't a lot of crazy stuff. You'd just see a lot of throwing of food, and just what's like in kindergarten and working through that. But I kept at it. I made that promise, and I kept that promise. And as the boys grew older, as they got to 9 and 5, and then 11 and 7, and then 13 and 9, it got real. The issues that they had went from, laughing when they said the word poopy to now we're talking about sex, and we're talking about drugs, and we're talking about alcohol, we're talking about religion, we're talking about politics. And the boys knew that it was a safe space. The boys knew that they could say what they wanted to say and know that it wouldn't be repeated anywhere. And we'd built years of trust at the table. And as a result, we bonded and we became very close. And those relationships are the foundation of who I am and the foundation of my life. And I would not ever give that up for any amount of money. So we did that dinner table until Michael my oldest, turned 16, and then was driving, and he was driving Kyle to school. So sometimes we wouldn't have breakfast because they'd leave early. And then we tried to have dinner, but with sports and with after-school activities, that kind of fell by the wayside. When we did have the dinners, it was just like we'd go back to where we were. We often would invite people over for dinner. Just a friend might come sit in. And at first they were kind of surprised as to how much talking was going on and how open we were. But once our friends got the hang of it, they wanted to be part of it because the discussions were honest. The discussions were interesting. The boys are intelligent, and they had some very interesting and strong opinions. And people responded to that with their own opinions. And the boys would listen to it because they listened to them all the time. That dinner table talk, that is kind of the basis for what I want this podcast to be. Is similar to us just talking at the dinner table, us talking about things that are important as we go through it. We will go through the fundamentals. As I said, the first fundamental is why are you a lawyer? Why are you doing what you're doing? Get past the I'm making a living and I need to make money to survive. Let's get into that a little deeper, and that gets into core values. And what are your core values? And that's the next podcast. And then we'll also get into the marketing side. You cannot have a practice, whether you're in any kind of law practice, you cannot be a lawyer if you don't have clients. And so you've got to get clients. And all that goes to a written business plan. So one of the first podcasts is why a written business plan is so important and what should be contained in it. Once we get through marketing, we'll do technology. And then we'll also talk about the biggest danger to lawyers today. And to give you an idea of what that podcast is about really briefly is Utah and now Arizona has allowed non-lawyers to own law firms. Florida and Texas are currently considering that option. What I fear is going to happen, and I'm starting to see a few articles that are coming out about this fear, and I've been talking about this in class for the last 2 years since it was enacted in Utah, This is the biggest threat to lawyers right now. The commoditization, the disruption of law practice. And I will talk about what I see in the future is happening with that. And I will also talk about what you can do as an attorney when it comes. It's not if it comes, because it's coming. The way it is with big money in Arizona right now, and if Florida or California agree, everybody's going to agree. And we will see the commoditization of law practice. We will have Apple law, we will have Amazon law, and it'll go the way of medicine, where mid-management controls things. And the practice, and if you know anything about medicine, the practice of medicine now is very difficult for even a patient to get some treatment they need unless they go through the steps. We'll see some of that with law firms and lawyers being reduced to just simply hourly workers or salaried workers with no ownership in the firm and no possibility of ownership in the firm. And so how can you beat that? What can we do as an attorneys to make ourselves more marketable, or are we just all going to join that? And that'll be another one of my podcasts. So thank you for listening. I have no idea if anybody will ever hear this or if it'll ever work, but thank you for listening, and we will talk to you later.